Happy Friday, Security Nurse Podcast listeners. My pleasure to introduce to you today Mike Gips. He is a security executive, attorney, writer, journalist, and researcher. He is the principal of Global Insights in Professional Security and recently joined Kroll in January of 2025 as managing director in the ESRM division. Previously, Mike served as the Chief Global Knowledge and Learning Officer for ASIS International, where he oversaw learning, content, certification, standards and guidelines, production, enterprise security risk management, and other departments. And he is also a fellow alumni of the Kindness Games. And so I was really excited to be able to talk with him. He is a wealth of knowledge. And when I first kind of came into the security scene, trying to navigate things, I was definitely overwhelmed. And he was a source for me. And I got the chance to kind of pick his brain and wanted to share that with all of you. So if you are wondering certifications to go after, trainings to seek, and kind of your pathway in security, whether it's healthcare security, private sector, corporate, whatever it may be, you're going to want to tune in to this episode. Well, hello, Mike Gips. Thank you for being here with me today on the Security Nurse Podcast.
My pleasure, Sarah Maria. I'm going to call you SMB.
SMB. Now, how did okay, I think we have to explain to everybody how I got the nickname SMB. So I'll leave that up to you. You can go ahead and explain that.
Absolutely, and I think it's a great name, by the way. I say it with respect and affection. We are both members of the Kindness Games, and that is an initiative created by Tim Wenzel and Lee Outen to express care, concern, kindness, understanding to people who may not be going through the best of times, and just decency in a time of a lot of division. And it was their brainchild. We both did videos calling out people that were important to us. We thought that deserve recognition in the industry or beyond the industry. And we both contributed chapters to the Kindness Games book.
Yes.
And I am a really big fan of, I think you had the most powerful chapter in the whole book. And that's saying a lot.
Thank you.
Because there's 17 chapters and 17 different writers. And I really love it's extremely moving and profound.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed yours as well. And I learned a lot from all the chapters and especially yours. And so I thank you again for being on here today because I know that you're busy. Congratulations on the new role, by the way.
Thank you. And tell the folks out in podcast land that as we were starting this podcast, I got a call from my new employer, Kroll, and they were asking me to take on a new assignment, which I was happy about. But you were kind enough to delay the beginning of the podcast. So
Well,
thank you.
You're very welcome. You're very welcome. I'm just excited to have you on and have you here. And I get to kind of pick your brain a little bit. And you're right. We met through the Kindness Games. That was kind of the start, one of the starts of my journey of kind of coming into the security industry. And I have to say the nickname SMB, it's not original to me having my name shortened. My best friend growing up actually in elementary school called me Smek, because those were my initials at the time. So it's literally been like the theme of my life. Everybody taking my initials and shortening it. So I guess I've just kind of given up and I'm going to embrace it. And, it's fun to have a nickname.
Yeah, it's a sign of, respect and affection, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Do that.
Yeah. No, I agree. Well, I wanted to have you on today because I know with your background and like I said, myself kind of navigating the security industry, it was really overwhelming at times, kind of trying to figure out like what certifications, what degrees, what's this, what's that? How do I navigate all of that? And so I really wanted to kind of jump in and ask you to kind of help clarify all of that. If I'm an aspiring security industry, new person in security, where's a good place to start?
And it's a great question. It all depends on where you're coming from. You might be coming from law enforcement. You might be coming from being a security officer. You might be in a corporation as an engineer or a business person. You might be coming from the military. So, depending on where you're coming from, what degree and what skills and what certifications you already have, that plays a large part in determining, where you would go from there. So I'll start with, if you're a security guard, um, you might want to start with IFPO, the International Foundation for Protection Officers. It is a good glide path or good development path to from your skills, from basic skills performing guard like duties to taking on more responsibility, more leadership, more complicated, higher level skills, reasoning, problem solving, leadership skills like inspiration, project management, things like that. And they do a very good job. They have certificates and certifications to develop you as a security professional beyond being a practitioner or someone practicing guard functions. So that's a really good stepping stone. If you are coming and from there, I would say the next step would be with ASIS, where I worked for a long time. So I'm obviously slanted a little bit towards ASIS, but they have very good education and programming. They have a range of certificates and certifications. Certificates, all different areas like ESRM and retail security, and those are good for just developing knowledge and skills. They're not necessarily full certifications that require studying and get you all the trappings that come with it. But so if I were coming from IFPO, saying I was early on in my career and in my management career, I'd probably go for the APP, the Associate Protection Professional, which is an early stage certification for the basic skills you'll need as a security manager and eventually a security leader executive. Beyond that, there's the CPP, which is sort of the gold standard for the certified protection professional. And you see that a lot of folks, security executives, managers, senior managers, directors, CSOs have that credential. There's also specialty credentials within ASS. There's the PCI, the Professional Certified Investigator. Obviously, you do that if you're in investigations. And then there's the Physical Security Professional if you want standing a foundation in physical security concepts like CCTV, lighting, some subted principles, things like fences and gates and safes. And that's a very good background for that. If you're coming, and do you want me to pause there and go over any of those things, or do you want me to just continue my?
I know. Well, and that's why we're talking about it, because it's broad, and I realize it's a broad subject and kind of complex too. But I think just giving listeners a place to start, and really kind of helping navigate that would be awesome. So yeah, if you want to kind of keep going, let's do that.
Sure. Now that's all on the professional side. When I say professional, security as a profession rather than dealing with the tools and technologies and like you would as if you were an installer or a specifier or an integrator. There are also certificates and certifications for that SIA offers and some other organizations. So, similar to in the cyber realm, you could get management level certification like from ISC squared, like CISSP, Certified Information System Security Professional, would be like the CPP is to ASIS. Comparatively, there are certificates and credentials like, Microsoft, like you're able to skilled with the tools or whatever, or you can build various security, cybersecurity tools or no coding or things like that. So that's the analog of CPP is to some of the CIA stuff as CISSP is to Microsoft systems. I can do this function, I do this software. And frankly, if I were joining a company or joining the security industry or the security profession and was planning on either cyber or physical or a combination of the two, I'd probably start with the CISS I think there's a CISM, Certified Information Security Manager. I start with the cyber side
Okay.
because, frankly, we're in a cyber world.
Yeah.
Cyber people, you know, those skills are more valued. The board cares more about cybersecurity than physical security. Ideally, you're going to have both, and it's going to be integrated.
Right.
Right now, I think probably one of the most valuable credentials is CISSP, the Certified Information Systems Security Professional. And I would couple that with the CPP, which is pretty much the gold standard in physical security. But people only have so much time, so much budget. It takes a
Yes.
long time to
Yeah.
study for these things, and it takes sometimes a career to know this stuff. I took the CPP exam in 2018. I had already been in security for 25 years by then, and it was still difficult for me. And I worked for ASIS. Like, I kind of was marinating in all those theories and those concepts that are taught, right?
Yeah.
But I still had to learn how long, it takes for certain kind of lighting to warm up, or, if you want to use lighting in to do some particular kind of identification, or for best color or whatever, which kind of CCTV camera, and how, what, when you're using sensors, which are ones that are immune from, the effect interference from running water, things like that, like really detailed questions. So,
Well, two things when you mention that. So first, I don't think I really had any idea that it has taken those professionals that long to get that certification. So I have a whole new outlook and respect for anybody with a CPP.
mhm.
I really do. And I think that that is just amazing. And secondly, you bring up just kind of like the complexity of it. I don't think I realized even things like lighting and that kind of stuff kind of going into it. So I appreciate you sharing that, because I think the second thing I was kind of thinking was some of that imposter syndrome, right? It's easy to kind of start comparing, this person has this certification and I don't have that yet. But when you maybe you haven't been in security for very long and don't fully understand the gamut of all of that, it's kind of encouraging to hear that.
Yeah, I would say so. And there's also different theories, or perspectives on these certifications. Do you really need them per se? For some jobs, maybe. Certainly helpful. They're certainly helpful. I think maybe for the cyber ones, they're maybe more necessary than the physical security ones. There are plenty of physical security people or traditional security professionals who don't have them. And if you look through job descriptions and advertisements, a lot of them don't require them, or they say they're beneficial but not necessary. And there are people who think like they're just a box to check. Well, they're all what you make them of them. To me, it's not the credential itself, it's the work that you put into it, and it's the dedication, and it's the mindset that you're a continuous learner, and that's what it shows to me. Not, okay, you can study for an exam for 6 months or whatever and cram and do it, but that's not really the point. It's that you're of the mindset, you're that type of person who's always looking to improve themselves, gain more knowledge. And so when I look for people with certifications, it's for that, rather than, oh yeah, they memorized that the parts of an investigation or whatever. When do you use undercover investigations versus overt investigations or something like that? That's what's key to me.
Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense. I think also just being able to teach others, right? Like, kind of the premise of our whole conversation today is going to be on education and security
Mm-hmm.
and being able to do that. So I think it's great that, you can take those tests and get that certification. But as someone that kind of crammed in nursing
Mm-hmm.
school, and having to kind of remember that stuff, but also realizing that taking it to that next level is being able to educate and teach somebody else, right? And so that actually kind of segues into one of my next question is, how do you feel that security education has evolved over the years, and why is education in security so important?
Great question. Over the years, I think, especially, well, after 9/11, we saw in academic institutions the introduction of a whole new field of security, homeland security, with after 9/11 and the development of the Department of Homeland Security in the United States, we saw a lot of attention paid to um, sort of nation states, terrorist groups, how that rather than, it used to be you would take a security class in a college and it would be things like, you know, crisis management and sort of the next criminal justice and how that affects, the law and how that affects basic security. And so it'd be a lot of uh, crisis management, and there's still that criminal justice, basics of security management. After 9/11, it turned a lot into courses became like homeland security, protection of critical infrastructures, things like that. And then in the cyber age, it started a lot of attention started going to cybersecurity skills, cybersecurity and digital management, which now they have the lion's share of the market. But for physical security professionals and also to some extent IT security professionals, it's also transformed or evolved into the business element. A lot of people said they said this for 20 years now, and sometimes it's true and sometimes it's aspirational. But a lot of security executives say I'd rather hire somebody who knows business and teach them security than hire someone security and teach them business. Because really, to be a good security professional, you have to know how the business works, what the assets are, what the threats are, vulnerabilities, your culture. Often a security person who does it right is the most knowledgeable person about how things work in the company. Operations, back of house, everything from, the marketing to supply chain to brand protection. So
Yeah.
it's really moved towards people getting MBAs and other kinds of business education rather than just traditional security skills.
Yeah, I think you see that a lot in healthcare too, right? And honestly, I took a little time out and became a marketing and event director for a taekwondo center in Colorado Springs. And I think
Wow.
it was probably, yeah, it was probably the best thing I could have done for my nursing career actually, because it really helped give a perspective on interacting with people in a whole different way that I didn't even think of as a nurse. And so I can definitely see where understanding having that business background and being able to be taught security kind of later on can really come in handy. And I think that's a good insight for anyone new, right? Getting into security is kind of start to learn the business side of things too.
Exactly. Anything you want to do beyond the most elementary level, you should be understanding the business. So if I were a new security person and I wanted to be a holistic security professional, I would obviously go for the physical and cybersecurity backgrounds, know some of the technical stuff as well so you're competent. You don't have to be an installer and integrator, but it helps to know the protocols, it helps to know the basics of, how to build a system. And I definitely have a big part of it would be about leadership and knowing the business. So all those things, and it's a continuing journey. You have to really, I happen to like, continuous learning. I have a fair number of credentials,
Yeah.
academic background, and I'm taking a course right now on operational resilience, and it's not easy. There's a lot of assignments, a lot of writing. It's given in Australia, so it's 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. their time, and it's 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. my time. So it's, after a full day of work, and you
Okay.
have to stay engaged. You have to participate in the class, you have to write. And the earlier iteration, they had it in the afternoon in Australia, and it was 11 p.m. to 3 a.m. my time, which is like, that's just,
Oh my
not
gosh.
sustainable. So, but I'm learning a lot of things about cognitive biases, about sort of um, risk frameworks that I didn't really know, thing and a lot of other kind of business tools, models that I wasn't aware of, and sort of how to create like a risk mindset. And there's a lot of research behind that. So just the other day, I learned something called the what's it called? The Cynefin framework, which is
Okay.
it looks at systems and it breaks them down into simple systems, complicated systems, complex systems, and chaotic systems, and what that means, and how to deal with those kinds of issues, and how to move something from one quadrant to another. And, sort of what that means. So a simple system would be just something that's very easy to do. It's very linear, cause and effect.
Okay.
So like putting together like something from, well, maybe not IKEA because that's a little more complicated, but putting together something that's very simple according to directions.
I'm always the one that gets stuck putting together the IKEA stuff.
Me too. Well, I put it together, and there's always like, do they mean this or this? And then it comes out backwards, and
It
then I have to,
always
yeah.
reminds me of the Iowa State testing, where there was that one part on the Iowa State testing that we took in elementary school where the paper was folded, they'd punch a hole and then unfold it, and
Oh
you had to
yeah,
figure out where all the holes were.
yes, yeah. The spatial relations, that was always tricky for me. I was always good with the words, and the logic. But once
Okay.
they said we're going to rotate this thing, it's like, oh, no, I don't know what side that is on, or what that shape is like with the holes and everything.
Hmm.
So yeah, so I don't mean to get into that
No,
too
no, you're
deeply,
okay.
but that's a sort of thing, looking at systems and models and frameworks for different things, and all the research that's gone behind, like high performing teams, high performing organizations, things like that, and being resilient and being able to, not just bounce back from a crisis, but to improve, sort of leverage situations, but yeah, ethically, not taking advantage of bad things for your own benefit, but
Mhm.
sort of getting ahead of it, and helping others while you're at it.
I love that. It sounds
Yeah.
like a really interesting class, and one that I feel like when you talk about simple systems and complex and chaotic, like I'm
Uh-huh.
immediately transported to the ER.
Exactly.
Yeah, and kind of
ER
determining.
would be a chaotic, like this. It's at least complex, which is, there's actually like maybe a cause and effect. Once you get to chaotic, it's like you don't know you could do anything. You have to act first,
Yeah.
like to stand. And ER is actually the prototypical forum for that, because they have like responses. So what do you do? Like if you have a simple system, you observe this, whatever. But with a chaotic system, you act first. And very, very few situations you act first to get to know what's going on. And in ER, yes, do
Hmm.
something, right?
Yep.
I mean, you actually got to see what's going on, but like do something, and then you can, okay, now we know what we're dealing with, right?
You're
You have to
acting while
stabilize the
you're
person.
assessing.
Right. You have to
Yes.
stabilize the person first, right? You've got to
Yes.
act, right?
Yep.
Exactly. So,
Yep. So and you've kind of, you've been involved in developing trainings and
mhm.
educations and things like that. And so what is your approach to creating like an engaging and impactful education? What's your approach to that?
I'm a big fan of not speaking at people, bringing them in, and also making sure they have fun while they're doing it. And I'm actually doing, Chuck Andrews, right?
Yes.
Friends of
Yep.
Chuck.
Yep.
Chuck and so I'm doing two programs next year. One with Friends of Chuck
On the cruise, the security cruise. Okay.
and another with Security Journal Americas is having their Leaders in Security Americas conference
Boys,
for the first
Chicago.
time in
Hmm.
Chicago.
Yep.
And I'm part of that as well. I'm leading that as well. I'm the MC there, and we have an advisory board, and we're right at the beginning now of creating content. So that's going to be more comprehensive and a little more traditional, but we're trying to do stuff that's off the beaten path, that hasn't been talked about a million times already, and maybe a little bit of conflict involved, and not a negative conflict, but
Okay.
where you sort of have a traditional way of doing things. You might have a traditional way of doing things like thought leadership, for example, where you're like me, where you write articles, you present, and then you have somebody like, Tyler Schmoker,
Hmm.
who kind of has a different approach, right? And takes a fair amount of criticism for it, but he's authentically himself. And there are other folks who do similar things, but maybe bring in, who thinks, okay, LinkedIn is the way to go. And other people are, LinkedIn is, you know, social media is, is either irrelevant, or it's overplayed, or it's too much of vulnerability. And get people like them on the stage who like kind of the old generation and the new generation, and kind of respectfully battle it out. and,
Okay.
things like that. Now, this is still, I can't say that's actually going to happen. These are still kind of thoughts, like
Concepts.
concepts, but
Concepts. Okay.
so conflict without bitterness or anger or bad feeling
Yeah.
for the benefit of just, opposing sides and creating breakthroughs and clarity and inspiration, right?
Yeah. Debate conversation.
There you go.
Conversational debate. There we go.
Perfect, perfect.
All right.
And all these people are professionals and they're respectful. So, but with the cruise, Chuck and I were just talking about it yesterday, as a matter of fact. And one of the things we're going to do is a Jeopardy show.
Okay. I was just gonna.
Yes, I did that with Yo-Yo on
Yeah,
her
you did that
podcast.
with Yo-Yo, and then actually for my trauma nursing certification, we do like, well, for also for the pediatric one too, we do like a Jeopardy, and you're given symptoms and things like that, and have to kind of figure out like what the intervention is or what you're looking at and that kind of stuff.
Exactly. And we're gonna do that. And if you remember from Yo-Yo's podcast, some of it is fun, but
Yes.
it's all gonna relate to things that are in the body of knowledge for ASIS, the CPP, the PSP, maybe the APP, but in a fun and engaging way. And it's not just going to be the three people. There are going to be three contestants, but there's going to be an audience component as well. Like if
Okay.
nobody knows, they can go out to the audience, and there's going to be prizes and things like that.
Wonderful.
Yeah, and because we're going to get, we want to make sure, and it's going to be approved for continuing education units for ASIS.
Yes.
So it's going to align with the knowledge domains for the CPP and perhaps for other certifications as well. We're also going to do a scavenger hunt sort of thing, like the Amazing Race, which
Okay.
is also going to be, it's it's going to be fun because you got to move around, figure things out in an out of the box way, but it also require you to have basic understanding of security principles, maybe do certain things like, if not pick a lock, like understand how, being able to apply a principle before you get an answer. So you've watched The Amazing Race,
Mhm.
and they go to different places and they get a card and says you have to do this. Well, rather than, we're not going to have people obviously on a ship like hiking mountains or whatever, but they may have to figure out through some puzzle, like some access control concept or some crisis management principle, or we're still working through it. But
Okay.
to your question, it's engagement and it's applying principles. It's not just memorizing things, and it's getting people to be excited about it and active, because the more actively engaged you are, the more you're going to remember it, the more it's going to activate your reticular activating system.
Stump.
Yep. Yeah, I can use those kind of fancy words and phrases with you because as a medical professional,
Well,
those.
I'm a neuroscience geek too. Like
Oh
the
yeah,
Huberman Lab is like one of my go-to for podcasts. So
nice.
I would love to have him. Hey, Andrew Huberman, if you'd like to come on and talk about the neuroscience of violence, I would love to have you.
I'd love to listen to that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be great. So in this class in Australia, I was talking about, a lot of people we talk about triggering your RAS, your reticular activating, so like kind of like getting you thinking and jazzing you up and things like
Yep.
that. Yeah.
Well, and let's kind of explain that a little bit because so part of that is like the reticulating activating system is when something kind of comes to the forefront of your mind, you're constantly kind of seeing it. So like
Hmm.
one of the ways I've heard it explained is when you want to buy a new car and there's a specific car that you're looking at, all of a sudden you see that car, driving around on the road, right? And I think it could go back to your bias too. You have to be careful with that because you don't want it to start to create bias, right? Where you're only recognizing one thing and not kind of paying attention or understanding other stuff that's going on.
Yes, you are 100% right on that. That, as a matter of fact, we learned about the RAS talking in the context of heuristics and biases, cognitive biases. So you're 100% right about that.
Yeah.
And also, I think there's some of the other biases, like things with Dunn-Kruger effect. That might be the one where Is that the one where you listen to experts and say, "Oh, that guy knows what he's talking about, so I'm going to listen"? So don't follow that into with me. Do your own research.
Yes, always do your own research and think outside the box. That is like one of my favorite taglines. In fact, I was going to ask you, nobody figured out my puzzle. I posted that on LinkedIn.
Oh, I haven't seen that.
So I posted this on LinkedIn and I
Uh-huh.
asked people, how do you connect the lines or the dots? You can only use lines and you have to keep your pen on the paper. You can't lift it and you have to connect all the dots using
I think
lines.
I'm pretty sure I can do that.
Can you do it?
I think so. So lines that you can't. So like you just. So how many lines are you saying?
So it takes 4 lines.
Okay, so I'd say so. You're obviously people are going to try to make the 4 lines of the square, and then, but if you just go beyond the dots and go way out, you can go like that, that. I'd have to,
Yeah, so here
yeah.
I'll draw it one line at a time, right? So
You have to go outside the square.
you come up the middle,
Yep,
right?
yep,
And then you go down
yep.
far enough
Far, yep, below that
so
bottom.
that you can cross over.
Huh?
Oops.
And then, yep, and then
Yeah,
you get
I'm
the
holding
last
that
one.
right. And then there you go.
Yep,
So you have to go outside the
you have to go
box
outside the box.
to connect all the dots.
Yes, exactly. So you're literally thinking outside the
Outside the
box.
box. Yep.
Yep.
I learned that in Girl Scouts.
And that's still no one can get it right, right?
I know. It's been a mantra of mine for a
Mm.
very long time,
Right.
thinking outside the box. Um, so let's see. We've talked about so much.
I'd like to insert a couple of other certifications that I haven't mentioned that are
Okay.
also really important. If you're in fraud, if you're doing fraud investigations or any kind of financial investigations, I think that the gold standard is the CFE, Certified Fraud Examiner.
Okay.
That's a great one to have because there's so many different specialties within security.
Mm-hmm.
There's also I have a chartered security professional certification, which is basically a British Empire one.
Okay.
So it's a big one there. I have the security risk management body of knowledge. So it goes beyond security, it goes more into risk management. They're the ones they're ones related to business continuity, disaster management that colleagues of mine have who are, and I forget the names off the top of my head. They find those are very valuable. Chris Stitt, right? He's also a member.
Yes. Yep.
He has some of those. He's a business continuity expert. He has his own firm, and I would defer to him on
On some
those,
of those.
on what the good ones are, what the best ones are.
Okay.
Yep.
Is there a database that you know of that's put together that kind of breaks this down at all?
I think there might be some websites
Okay.
that try to list them all. They also specialties for a lot of different vertical markets. Like there's certified lodging security director, and there's a security association for hotels
Mm-hmm.
that issues that. There's the IAHSS, International Association of Healthcare Safety and
Yes, thank
Security,
you.
that
I
you're
was going to
very,
make
yep.
sure.
And they have and a lot of folks that I respect and admire greatly in the field, Bonnie Michaelman, Eric Clay, quite a few other people have those designations.
Yes.
And I would defer to them. Certainly those are outstanding in that field. And I believe there are a few others. I'm sure there are a few others. Off the top of my head, I can't remember, but there's so many. You have to do your research because some of them are like, they're like those degree diploma mill kind of things, like, oh, just pay and you can get a certification.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they're just be careful. Most of the ones out there I think that I've seen are good and reputable and valuable, but there are others that kind of like on the periphery, or like, okay, if they're not asking for any kind of exam or any kind of legitimate display of your knowledge and experience, and if it's just kind of, okay, you'll get a paper if you send in $500, and just want to be careful. And I don't
Be
want to,
careful. Yeah.
yeah, I don't want to mention them. I don't know for sure which ones they're there might be ones out there that sound like they're questionable, but if you look underneath, it's like, okay, there's real rigor beneath it and legitimacy. Just
Yeah.
just buyer
Yeah.
beware.
Buyer beware for sure. And then like you get into like ATAP threat assessment
Hmm.
professionals and they have the CTM and that certification. So there's definitely like a lot out there.
There is.
And I think that's definitely a good kind of buyer beware because I know that was one of the things that I was kind of looking at all these different programs and certifications and what should I take and what should not I take and classes and things like that. And so I've kind of held off a little bit on that to really kind of more fully understand the scope of security and then also how I'm kind of fitting into it because I'm still kind of navigating my way into that. So definitely healthcare security related though.
Yeah. No, I really I think it's cool how you've moved in from the healthcare field and not as a security professional, as a medical service provider, as a medical professional. And yeah, we need people like you who are just, give to others and just, are sheepdogs. You know, are you familiar with that phrase?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, like who are just our protectors in our
Yes.
world.
Yes.
And you bring other skills, right? You come to security, you're already, CPR, stop the bleed, presumably, have a wide variety of skills
Yes.
and talents. Yeah.
Yes, I know executive protection for a while there. I had a lot of requests, but I just that lifestyle, being able to kind of travel and take jobs like that for months at a time was not realistic in my world. But for anybody that else is that's in healthcare, that might be a good transition is doing executive protection and kind of understanding, what all that entails. And because they're definitely I think the big sell for me was like the soft skills.
Hmm.
So, with me being in nursing and having the soft skills and being able to kind of communicate during those crisis times in maybe a softer way with, like a family, a family office, family home base who maybe has children or somebody that has medical needs and being in that environment on an executive protection detail. So it's definitely an interesting career choice, but just not one that I could make that was realistic for me. So
If I
um,
can comment on when you're a nurse, you have an enormous amount of influence on the experience of a patient. I don't know that many other fields where it's on one person to sort of influence or dictate the experience. So tell you, when my wife was pregnant for the first time, we were in the hospital and she was having labor pains and she fell on the floor and was lying down and like in agony. And
mm,
a nurse walks by and says, "Don't get too comfortable there." Like, who are you, Nurse Ratchet? Or whatever. And then another one was like, "Oh, honey, let me do this. Like you must be in pain." It's like the two diametrically opposed responses, like, and how my wife felt about the experience based, like, you have a tremendous amount of power based on how, sympathetic, how empathetic you are. And so when I see like mean nurses, I mean, I understand why they probably deal with a lot of stuff. Violence against nurses, it's almost an epidemic,
yeah,
right? It's
yeah, all
it's
time high right
horrendous.
now. Yeah.
But just a little bit of grace, a little bit of sympathy, a little bit of kindness goes so far when you're a nurse. And that's why people, you could either love your nurse or can't stand your nurse. And I have a feeling I know what kind of nurse you are. In the oh yeah, I love my nurse one. Yeah,
Well, thank
yeah,
you. No,
yeah.
and I think that's why I do have this focus on the behavioral threat assessment and
Hmm.
management, kind of going exactly to your point. Nurses are that first touch point, that de-escalation touch point, that fact gatherer, data gatherer, right? Like what's kind of really going on with this person? Where's the pain points? I mean, patients open up whether they're we could open a whole can of worms with this, but whether they're upset about their insurance or, their treatment or, a lot of frustration between, well, I have to go see this specialty doctor, but they don't know what's going on. So now they're sending me to this specialty doctor, and neither one of them are talking and communicating. And just so a lot of frustration there with patients. And so, you're absolutely right. Nursing and that touch point can absolutely like make or break a patient experience. And so one of the things that I do for that, and something that I promised myself a long time ago before I even started nursing, I was a nurse aide at the time, was that I wouldn't become jaded. Right. And so each patient is a separate experience. And that goes back to kind of those biases, right? You could clump everybody together that comes in that's maybe an alcoholic and they're going through withdrawals, or you could clump everybody together who, is a chronic, GI patient with chronic pain or something like that. It's very easy to kind of clump all those people together because they have a lot of overlapping and similar symptoms, medications, things like that, right? But when you do that, and that reticulating activating system, right? When that becomes activated and you're not being cognizant of those biases, then you miss opportunities to really get to the root cause of things. And you talked about Tyler. His episode's actually coming out this Friday. And we talked about root cause analysis. And so you miss out on that opportunity to really talk to that patient and find out what the root cause of the issue is.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes, the pain might be more severe because of some other psychosocial, emotional thing that's going on in their life. And just listening to that patient can maybe alleviate some of that pain and that discomfort. So I appreciate that, the kind words and kind of the opportunity to talk about that and how it relates, in my perception, how it relates to security, and kind of being that first touch point. And then going back to kind of what you talked about, understanding how does business work? How does security work? How does this work? And really becoming that holistic professional, not just nurse, but holistic healthcare professional, and being able to integrate in all of those kind of different areas and lead that and kind of help facilitate that and help with the education in those departments, and really bridge and collaborate.
Exactly. You summed that up perfectly. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So I know we're running short on time. I think I'm going to have you back for
I'd love to come
a
back.
second
Yeah.
episode. I have a couple of just rapid fire questions that I wanted to ask you.
Okay.
So, first one, actually, hold on. Let's back up second because I do want to ask this one. What are some key practices that organizations should follow to build kind of a strong security posture and security first culture within their organization? Within their organizations.
Great question. I don't know if this is rapid fire or not,
Well, no,
but
I'm backing
yeah.
up. So we're
Okay.
doing that first, and then we'll do the rapid
Okay.
fire.
Okay. I'm not making security a punitive sort of thing, making it part of the culture, but not something that is a sort of a pain in the butt or something that is like mandated or compliance based, something that we're all in this together and explain why security protocols are in place, be very upfront about sort of the balance between convenience and security and why the organization has picked this particular balance or approach, how, and even designating people with specific security responsibilities or delegating responsibilities to certain people um, collectively, not so that you have a narc watching over everybody and saying, oh, it's not an environment where you're telling on people, but it's an encouraging, it's a sort of nurturing environment where you collectively look out for each other's benefit and the organization's benefit without being, as I said, like compliance based or punitive based. And there's different ways of doing that. Like, for example, if you wanted to do, a test on people like not falling for, cyber attacks or for phishing attacks, right?
Okay.
You wouldn't punish somebody. You might do a test. You wouldn't punish somebody if you're or call them out. Oh, this person fell for it. They clicked on something. Maybe you do it and say, oh, if somebody, you do these kind of drills or whatever randomly and if somebody figures it out, they're like, oh, this person, you call them out and say, they get like a pizza party or something like that. Or, this is the kind of thing we want to promote. You don't call people out who click on it. Maybe you talk to them privately, praise in public, as in private, that sort of thing. So
Right.
there's ways that's a very basic way of approaching it, where we're all in this together, and there's no um, the enforcers and then everyone else who resents it, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and just you speaking, I hear again kind of what we're talking about, that need for engaging education. Because like for me, maybe somebody that clicked on it, didn't quite have the education that day, or, didn't fully understand kind of the implications of what they were doing and what was going on. So I think always kind of having that benefit of the doubt and realizing that it's an opportunity for education for your staff.
Right. And insider threat is probably, if not the biggest threat that organizations face, it's certainly one of them. And most of that is it's unintentional, right? It's just people who are like, want to do things quickly, or they're being lazy about it, or they forgot or whatever. And you want to you don't want a heavy hand with it, and it's like the carrot beats the stick in most cases.
Yeah. Great advice. Okay. On to rapid fire.
Uh-huh.
Okay. You ready?
Yeah.
All right. What's the one security tip everyone should follow?
Ooh. That's a great question. One, situational awareness, just knowing where you are at any given time and what the threats are and where you might be exposed, and just acting prudently.
Okay.
Having situational awareness.
All right. Perfect. What's the most common security mistake people make?
Probably not being situationally aware. Kind of just going to things and not,
back to the basics, right?
Back to the basics, right? I mean, I do it too. We all fall for it. It's like I kind of plow through doing stupid things and double down sometimes, Yeah,
like complacency,
or even just stubbornness.
Okay. Yep. All right, last one, and I'm hoping you get this one. How many doors could Benji the door build if Benji could build doors?
If Benji the door could build doors.
How many doors could Benji the door build if Benji could build doors?
All right, so if it was like the woodchuck thing, if Benji the door could build doors, Benji the door could build enough doors to.
You have to make it fun and engaging. Yes, that was my fun engaging.
There we go.
Rapid fire question for the end of the podcast.
I couldn't figure out how to end it. I know how much wood could a woodchuck chuck if a woodchuck could chuck wood, a woodchuck would chuck as much wood as a woodchuck could chuck if a woodchuck could chuck wood. But I couldn't figure out how to do that with Benji.
With Benji the door. Yeah. It's a lot of D's. Well, Mike, thank you so much for being on the podcast today.
Thank you.
How can people find you? Like, what's the best way to find you, get in touch with you if, maybe they wanted to reach out?
LinkedIn. I always check that. And everything. Yeah, just find me, Michael Gips, GIPS, on LinkedIn. Connect with me, reach out. I love to meet new people, connect, learn about what you're doing, and help if possible.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks, SMB. This was a real delight. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Well, thank you for watching this episode of the Security Nurse Podcast with Mike Gips. I hope you found the episode helpful. Mike is full of a lot of great knowledge and tips, and I know if you reach out to him on LinkedIn, he'd be willing to answer any questions that you might have. Be sure to follow the podcast on YouTube. You can click and subscribe. Also on Spotify, and there is a LinkedIn page as well for the Security Nurse Podcast. And if you want to follow me on LinkedIn, you're more than welcome to. I'd love to connect with you. My name is Sarah Marie Baumgartner. And what I'd love to leave you with on this lovely Friday is another podcast that I really enjoy listening to. It'll probably come out today. Is the Security Vine podcast hosted by Yolanda Hamlin, Michael White, and Dahlin Law. They dive into some really interesting and complex security topics, and they do it with a colorful, lighthearted, and funny twist. It's a really good end to your work week. So thanks again for watching.